week's episode of the Goodrum Show with me, Chris Goodrum. As per usual, a big thank you to everybody that watched last week's episode of the show, liked, commented, all that kind of stuff. Had a nice email from Eastland Alba saying thank you for doing the episode of the show. They didn't say anything negative, so I assume they were happy with the reviews that I gave them. But anyway, if any of them kind of piqued your interest, pick up a bottle. I'm sure they're fair. Well, I don't know if they're widely available now, but they probably will be before long, and certainly some are available at a certain whisky merchant. Anyway, on to this week's episode of the show. Now, as you probably know, I pick up lots of odd samples from various places. You know, I get distilleries and producers and reps and so on and so forth sending samples. I even buy some myself, shock horror, yes. I often sort of keep them and think, you know, I'd like to do an episode of the show on them, and I just never get the opportunity because I either don't have enough from that particular producer or that particular style. So, as you well know, every now and again I like to do a sort of like a bit of a random episode and grab a few, you know, completely different things and review them, and that's what I've done for this week's episode of the show. Weirdly enough, here's a bit of a weird one for you. When I did the title page and sort of saved it and all that kind of stuff, I discovered that this is not the first time in October that I have done a random episode of the show. I actually did one in October of 2021 where I did a selection of interesting stuff, and here's the spooky bit. On that episode of the show, I forget which week it was, but anyway, I reviewed the Torabhaig Alt Glyn. Or Alt Glyn, or Glen, or Glen, or possibly. And weirdly enough, I'd chosen to do the current new release from Torabhaig in this week's episode of the show. I mean, that was a bit weird, as we said, but then, you know, coincidence. I mean, considering I've been doing this thing now for well over 10 years, every now and again you're gonna get a coincidence. So this week's episode of the show contains a couple of not celebrity endorsed whiskies, but celebrity collaboration whiskies. Now, I don't know about you, but I mean, you know, I've been in this business for long enough and become horrendously cynical about whiskies and what have you. And whenever I sort of see yet another release about another celebrity collaboration, one's eyeballs are raised, and you think, oh God, here we go again. I mean, what's the latest one? Beyonce and whatever that's called. I mean, you know. I mean, you know, the thing is, it's not necessarily that I have an issue with celebrity endorsements. It's just sort of like it's always the same. It's like, oh, the celebrity's been into whiskey for donkey's years, loves whiskey, always wanted to make a whiskey, you know, was brought up on whiskey, his mother fed it to him out of a bottle, blah, 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 you know. And you just sort of think, oh God, it's just another money-making exercise for them. And then you kind of like sort of stop and you sort of like think, well, okay, obviously a lot of these celebrities, like for example Jensen Button, and we're looking at Coachbuilt this week, you know, they have a career, and that career sort of comes to an end through, you know, maybe injury or age, or, you know, just becoming crap at it possibly, and so they need to do something else. They need to make money. I mean, I've got no issue with people making money, and you know, maybe they have got an interest in whiskey, and maybe, you know, they get somebody on board that knows what they're talking about, and, you know, for example, the whole Beyonce thing, she's teamed up with Dr. Bill Lumsden, who, well, knows a little bit about whiskey at the end of the day. And so the two whiskies I'm looking at today, amongst the other ones, like I said, there's the Jensen Button Coachbuilt blended Scotch whiskey, and he apparently got together with a chap called George Koutakis, I believe. Never heard of the guy. He's apparently a whiskey expert. Oh, I hate that term. You know, when people say, oh, you must be the whiskey expert, and I go, well, no, that's too highfalutin and a bit up your own arse from my personal opinion. And I just sort of say, well, no, I'm not an expert. I just like whiskey. I know a bit about it. Anyway, I'm digressing. I'm sure this George guy is a really nice guy and probably knows an awful lot. I've never met the guy. Apparently he's a journalist, writes for Forbes. I don't kind of move in that kind of circle, so I've got no idea. So anyway, it's a collaboration between them. The other collaboration I'm looking at is called Storyman, which is apparently a collaboration between the actor James Cosmo, who I believe has been in stuff, but I'm not a film aficionado, kind of goes in one ear and out the other when I'm watching a film, and he's collaborated with the Annandale distillery. So Annandale know a little bit about making whiskey, so you know, you think and you look at these things and you think, well, maybe they're not too bad, and often they're not particularly expensive. I mean, Coachbuilt I think retails for £42.50. Storyman is a little bit more at £54.20. So they're not sort of break the bank things. And well, as I keep banging on about, it's not necessarily about all the names and the frippery and the packaging. It's the juice in the bottle that counts, and one should always bear that in mind. Ignore everything else and just see what the whiskey's like, because it actually might be pretty good. You never know. But anyway, we're going to find out amongst other things today. So I think that's enough waffling. Let's take a look at the lineup. Right, okay, so we're going to kick off with the aforementioned Coachbuilt blended Scotch whisky. So a blend of malt and grain. From the website, I believe they've chosen single malts from all the regions of Scotland. I'm hoping that's not one of those kind of gimmicks like the one used to be, which was, yes, all wonderful, you know, whiskey from all corners of the UK, but tasted god awful. Anyway, so like I said, this is a collaboration between Jensen Button and this George Koutakis guy, so we'll see what that's like. Bottled at 46%, which is good. So one imagines, you know, minimal filtration, hopefully no you know, chill filtration, all that kind of stuff, and well, it appears to look fairly natural. It's not, looks like it's been artificially darkened, shall we say. Anyway, moving on to the second one. This is a relatively new release. It's called Stauning Host. It's a blend of floor malted barley and rye, 50% of each. It's a new release. Because basically their whiskies are becoming too expensive, and they've decided they need a new entry-level whiskey. And you know what that means? Yep, that means probably younger spirit. Now, as you well know, I have this thing about European and Scandinavian and so on and so forth whiskies, that they're bottled far too young anyway, and they often tend to be overly fainty and really hard work. Stauning, there are some bottlings of Stauning that I really do like in actual fact, but you know, oh, you're on dangerous territory if you're using even younger spirits, so we'll see what that one's all about. Next bottle we'll be looking at is the Teeling Dark Porter Cask, again bottled at 40%. Stauning Host, by the way, is 40%. Again, you know, obviously trying to keep the price down, low duty, all that kind of stuff. Anyway, so the Teeling Dark Porter Cask, I think this is a 2022 release. I don't know whether then this is the thing, you know, about sort of Irish whiskey and Teeling in general, is that there's this kind of lack of transparency to a certain extent, and this was a thing that raised its head a number of years ago when a lot of these new brands were appearing. The thing is with Teeling is we know they're now in a new distillery, or they built their own distillery. It's been in production for, I don't know, 5 years, 6 years, something like that. I don't know what is actually that they're releasing is actually their own spirit, and what is still possibly ex-Cooley stock that they may or may not still be buying. I mean, certainly I know the pot still, I think is definitely theirs, and I think the peated one, whose name evades me at this present moment in time, I think that's their spirit as well. I don't know whether this is their spirit or not. I wish they'd put it on the bottle. I wish they'd say, you know, Dublin distilled or something like that, just to basically say, look, you know, this is our own spirit, and the blend and the single malt and all the other bottlings in the range are still sourced. I would just like to know that, but of course they're not going to do that, because I don't know, the Irish do seem to be a bit funny about that. But anyway, so this is spirit, whether it's their own or from Cooley, which has been finished in porter casks, and the cask came from the Dublin-based Dot Brewery. So I like how it's all symbiotic, should we say? But we'll see what that's all about. Right, now you're probably wondering why Storyman is down here at number 4, and that is because it's a blend of ex-peated Annandale and unpeated Annandale with Girvan grain. So could be interesting. Don't know what age it is. Neither of the two blends carry an actual age statement. So obviously the Storyman is not going to be that old. I mean, Ardnahoe have not exactly been around for forever and a day. So we'll see what sort of youthfulness that particular has. Talking of youthfulness, we're moving on to another peated malt. This is the inaugural release from the Ardnahoe distillery. So 5 years old. It's distilled from barley peated to 40 parts per million. So we're in the sort of Ardbeggy kind of area. It's 80% bourbon, 20% sherry. Nice combination. Yeah, and they proudly put 5 years of age on the label. Now I'm really into this. You know, the more information, the more transparency, the better, in my personal opinion. And I think we've kind of gone beyond the time where sort of customers kind of like went, "Oh, under 10 years old, oh, I don't want to buy that, it's too young." You know, it's like now we're getting quite used to these sort of bottlings that come along that I have an age statement under 10 years of age. And so I think all that kind of has been blown out of the water. And it's possible that it might have been bottled too soon. It might have been possible that they needed to get a product out on the market. Obviously, the only way we will tell that is when we taste it. And the final bottling is the aforementioned Torabhaig. This is the new release. This is chapter 3. It's called Cnoc na Moine, which means Hill of the Peat, I think. I should have written it down here, but I think it means Hill of the Peat. So it's bottled at 46%. It's a vatting of spirit that's been aged in ex-Bourbon, Oloroso and Pedro Ximenez. Now, I must say that all the Torabhaig bottlings I've tasted to date have been absolutely fantastic. Lovely balance. They certainly know what they're doing with the cask. And the interesting thing, I was chatting with the rep from Torabhaig some time ago, and the early days of Torabhaig, they were experimenting with cut points and all this kind of stuff, and you know, obviously now they're starting to release it, and so this is why they're not sort of doing a core release to a certain extent, because a lot of the stock that they've got built up and is ready to go is all different peating levels, cut points, you name it, you know, and so this is why they're sort of doing sort of chapters or sort of releases and giving them, which I'm all for. Absolutely brilliant. Again, love the whole transparency angle, and I'm a big fan of the whiskey to start off with, so I mean, I don't think this is going to be dreadful. Is it now? But anyway, we'll find out shortly. This love just rips right through me. Right, okay, so let's kick off with the Coachbuilt. So let's see what the nose goes on this end, shall we? A pleasant nose. It's quite fresh. It's barleyed, white fruit, a little bit of pepper. There's a youthfulness there. There's a little bit of rose petal, a little bit of apple, some salt, a little waft of smoke in the background. I'm getting a little bit of peat now with time. Leave it in the glass. The peat is starting to come out a little bit. Also, I'm getting a little bit more of that youthful spirit note. It's a pleasant whiskey at the end of the day. I think, you know, 42 quid. Yeah, I mean, I don't think that's bad for this whiskey. It's nice. I mean, God, I've come across a lot worse than this, and you know, being priced at a lot higher price. So on the nose, not too shabby. Let's see what that's like. Smoke. Didn't get that on the nose. Getting smoke on the palate now. Vanilla, a little bit of toffee, some dried fruit, some sherry notes. Quite malty, fuller, richer, less crisp, less citric than the nose would kind of lead you to believe. More earthy, a little bit more peat, nice length, quite robust. That is actually a well put together blend, I would say. It feels like it's got quite a high malt content. I'm not getting a great deal of grainy nip. There's a little bit on the finish. I suspect that what's going to happen with this is going to carry on being bottled, but over time I think the grain element is probably going to increase, mainly because they want to keep the price relatively stable. I mean, I'm assuming, because this is what happens to a lot of these kind of blends. They initially get launched with quite high malt content. They're really good, they hook you in, and then subsequent bottlings sort of year, 2 years down the line, I wouldn't say they're compromised, but you can tell that they've had to basically play around with the blend to keep the price down, and that, like I said, generally tends to mean more grain spirit. But this particular bottling, which I'm assuming is the currently available bottling, for a celeb whiskey, yeah, that's not too bad. Right, okay, so let's move on to the Stauning Host. So like I said, 50% floor malted barley and 50% rye. It's been aged in a selection of casks, first full American oak, virgin American oak, and then blended and finished it for 6 months in export casks. Now you could probably say, well, are they? No, I'm not going to go there. I'm just stick my nose in the glass and see what we get. Oh yes, God, that's pungent. It's kind of youthful, raw malt and barley, dark rye, really dark rye. Not getting an awful lot of American oak, not getting an awful lot of oak, full stop. There's a little bit of a portiness there. I think 6 months probably hasn't been long enough to give it any real sort of porty kind of character. I really don't warm to this at all. It's just too young, and I can see what they're trying to do. You know, I know the price of whiskey is going up and up and up. It's the way of these things, but and the trouble is that sort of to make something come in at a certain price point, and I don't know what this one retails for, but again, I can't imagine too much. Compromises are made, shall we say. Anyway, let's see what pass on. Pretty much as per the nose. It's young, it's fainty, it's a little bit raw. There's that dark rye, nice dark rye note, it has to be said. It's a bit short. It kind of lacks a little bit. It kind of hits the mid palate and then just goes, yeah, and surrenders at that kind of point. There's no real finish to it. The rye kind of comes back a little bit on the finish, and again, it just feels compromised. It feels like it's yeah, the spirit is too young, it's not spent enough time in the oak, it has no oak character really. There's a little bit of a portiness there, I guess, but it really is not, it's not doing them any favours, this particular bottling. That's all I can say. I think you'd have been better off not bottling it at all. Just, you know, okay, you just accept the fact that your whiskey is getting really expensive and just sort of like put up with it, rather than sort of release something that is flawed and compromised, in my honest opinion. But yeah. Okay, so let's move on to the dark port cask. Now, I mean, I like my beer, as you as you may well know, and I like sort of porters and stouts and things like that. So I do gravitate towards these kind of finishes. So I'm hoping this is going to be good. Again, it's a bit young. It's straw-like barley. There's a little herbal note. There's some dark fruit. I'm not getting a huge amount of porter. I'm not getting that sort of portery, stouty black fruit notes. There's a little bit of vanilla. It's all very young. And again, it just sort of, it's a bit like the Stauning. It just feels like there isn't the complexity there. It's got, and again, I don't know how much it's retail for. I don't think it was too expensive. I mean, you know, I'm not a rich man, you know. I bought a bottle of this. Yeah, again, I wouldn't say it's as compromised, but it just doesn't have the maturity, and it doesn't have the portiness or the stoutiness. So it kind of fails really there on that. But anyway, let's see what the pattern is. Well, it has a bit of a finish, it has to be said, and it has some portery notes that do kind of come through on the mid palate. But again, it's rose petal Mar, young spirit, a little bit of spice. There's some edginess there. It's not particularly soft. It's a bit spiky. It's spicy. It's it's a bit on the raw side. It's not ripping your head off kind of raw, but it's kind of like, it's that sort of like, well, really, you should have matured this a little bit longer, to be bluntly honest with you, or used a sort of like a blend of some older stuff, because this really doesn't taste very old at all. 3 years old, maybe. I mean, it's just not floating my boat.
World so bitter and cold.
Right, okay, so let's move on to the Storyman. Now, I often wonder how much influence the celebs kind of have on the blends, whether they're really hands-on, or whether it's basically a case of you sort me something out and I'll taste all the samples and say, yeah, I really like that one, let's go with that. I don't know at the end of the day. I'm not in the sort of like, that kind of circle, but when you think about it, there's an awful lot of these kind of things. I mean, there's the whole brands for fans business. I mean, Motorhead, the Motorhead whiskey. I mean, that wasn't a bad whiskey at all. It was Macmyra, for God's sake. I mean, it tasted a bit overly bourbony, but then Lemmy loved his Jack Daniels, for God's sake. And then you got Scorpions, and theirs was pretty good as well. If you like that sort of, I think that was cherry. I think there was some cherry matured casks or something like that in there. And there's been other things, Kiss. I mean, we shouldn't be surprised that that these kind of celebrities, bands and what have you are releasing a relatively good quality product, and really there's no excuse for it. So anyway, let's see what Storyman tells us then. Quite young, quite a bit of grain. I'm getting quite a lot of that sort of high toned Girvan grain character. Sweet barley, earth, coffee, peat, malt. There's a nippiness there. I mean, that's actually not a bad whiskey. 54 quid though. I do have a bit of an issue with that. I think it really should have been more in the 40s. There's a nice fruitiness coming through now. That sort of a slight esteriness. There's a little bit of rubber, a little bit of salt. Actually, that is quite complex. Maybe 50 quid is not such a bad price point. Like I said, I don't know how much influence James Cosmo had on this, but yeah, let's see what passes off. Again, we kick off with the nippy grain. There's some sweet barley, white fruits, peat smoke, earthy peat, a little bit of dried fruit kind of creeping in there, possibly a sherry cask or two in there, vanilla, nice length. I mean, again, bottled at 46%, the right ABV. It's obviously not been chill filtered. It's got a relatively good level of complexity, a nice length. There's a biscuitiness there. Yes, there's some youthful spirit. I think it's overpriced at 50 odd quid personally. I think if this was more in the 40s, like the Coachbuilt, you'd be going, yeah, that's pretty good. But you can't argue with the quality. I think the quality is pretty good, so yeah. Right, okay, so let's move on to the Ardnahoe. So 5 years of age, bottled at 50%, 8% bourbon, 20% sherry. It's a nice nose. It's quite soft. It's not spiky. There's no real spiritiness. Baked apple, autumnal. It's very autumnal. Peach. No, not peach. Pear, apple, apricot. A little bit of sultana, some lovely peat. Quite. It's got a little earthy peat and a little bit of salinity. Got some sweet peat as well. A bit of menthol creeping in now. Ooh, for 5 years old, this has actually got a lot of character. It's really very, very good. A little bit of green pepper, a little bit of astringency. You know what? That's a lovely nose. I like that. I'm really quite impressed with that. And it has its own character as well, and I think this is always the thing with the Islers, and certainly building a new distillery on Islay. You instantly want it to have its own character, which I guess is quite difficult when you're playing around with peat. There is a chance that you may well fall into a sort of a symbiosis of peat and Islay character, and not have too much distillery character. But so far, the new distilleries like Kilhoman, for example, and Ardnahoe have certainly developed their own individual style. And you can taste them, and they don't taste like the establishment, which is good, And you know what? I like this. I'm really quite impressed for such a young spirit, and it's not one-dimensional. It's not just peat. That's the point. They've obviously gone down the sort of making a relatively estery, fruity base spirit. I'm guessing, because there is an element of that coming through. And there's that lovely sort of softness and sweetness of fruit as well. So they've got the fermentation sort of like obviously down well, and it's producing a spirit. A spirit that's bottled at or can be bottled at a relatively young age. That's what pass on. Oh, it's got some lovely intensity. Kicks off with this lovely sootiness. It's rich, it's robust. There's a little bit more sherry on the palate, a little bit more raisinated fruits, apricot. Again, it has that sort of baked autumnal kind of fruit. Green pepper, salt, astringent coastal peat on the mid palate, really lingers. Herbal, salty, underripe fruit, astringent, saltiness, peat. That ticks all the right boxes. It has a lovely amount of complexity for such a young spirit. It's got length, it's got delivery, it evolves, and it takes you on a journey. I know that's getting a little bit sort of arsey there, I suppose, but it certainly does that. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what else Ardnahoe is going to release. And I think that if this is, and here this is the big problem, they have set the bar really, really high. They're going to have to sort of like go to town to sort of like match and get over that bar, because the starting point is bloody good. So it'll be interesting to see where they go. Right, okay, so on to the last whisky of the afternoon. This is the Torabhaig Cnoc and Moine, bottled at 46%. Let's see what those goes on this end, shall we? That's a really nice nose. Again, it's got a lovely balance. I'm getting treacly, PX, burnt coffee, burnt toffee, touch of Oloroso, some vanilla. Yeah, okay, so we're kicking off mainly with the oak, it has to be said, but there's a little bit of burnt biscuits, a little bit of astringent coastal peat, vanilla. Again, not particularly old. I forget how long Torabhaig have been around, but they've not been around for that long. And again, the spirit is not as overtly estery or as juicy or as fruity as Ardnahoe, but it's certainly mature enough to be bottled at this age. It's got a nip to it, and like I said, it's a little bit more oak influenced, and it's a little bit softer, and it's lovely. Let's see what those gives. Palate gives. That's a chewy, malty, peaty finish. That's got a lovely progression. It kind of kicks off with the American oak, so I'm getting sort of vanilla, a little bit of custard powder. Then we're sort of moving into the sherry. You get the treacle, the Oloroso dried fruits, the peat, the herbalness, malt biscuits, earth, touch of menthol, and then we're kind of back into the peat and back into the American oak. on the finish, and it's really salty, and it's kind of drying my mouth out. The intensity, I mean, is beautiful for 46%, has to be said. I mean, it just goes to show how 46% is just such a magical ABV. 50% maybe even better, but sometimes that extra alcohol does kind of compromise certainly the finish of whiskies and things like that, and some spirits don't kind of handle that particularly well. And not all whiskey makers or distillers or sort of bottlers are kind of like sort of particularly worried about the pounds, shillings and pence. With regards to sort of Torabhaig, it's kind of like, you know, what ABV kind of works for the spirit, and 40%, 46% works beautifully for this particular bottling. So and again, it's not a very expensive bottling. It's in the 50s. I know 50 odd quid is a lot of money at the end of the day. It's not as much as you would pay for a Macallan or something of that kind of ilk. But, you know, it's value for money at the end of the day is what it's all about. And, yeah, I like that. That's good. Right, okay, so that's some today's episode of the show. A big thank you to the distilleries, producers, and so on and so forth that sent samples. Like I said, I think the Teeling was one of my purchases. I think at the end of the day, I like doing these kind of random episodes. It's always a bit of fun at the end of the day. Yeah. Chuck in a few sort of bottlings and sort of see where it goes. And I thought this was a really good, fun episode of the show. Coachbuilt, Jensen Button, yeah, okay, like I said, I don't think that's a particularly bad whiskey. I think it's well priced, I think it's got a good level of complexity. I really hope they don't start to compromise it by chucking more grain in it sort of further down the line. Because it's what I kind of get the feeling with a lot of these kind of celeb whiskies is that they get involved possibly early doors with the initial blending and all this kind of stuff, and choosing the right vatting, for want of a better word, and then sort of they go off and do other shit, and you know they kind of leave the brand to kind of get on with it. And you know George will probably sort of go, right, okay, we need to do batch number 2, and whiskey's gone up in price, I've chucked more grain in, and it all becomes a little bit compromised. And I really hope it doesn't go down that route, but you never know at the end of the day. That's probably me being a little bit cynical, but then I've been around a while, it has to be said. I know how these things work. Stauning Host, like I said, really should not have gone down this route at all. I don't think it's a bad bottling, and I'm sure the Europeans love it because they love it all when it's all fainty and horrendous and all that kind of stuff. You know, in this country we have a little bit more of a refined palate, I think. My God, did I just say that? I'll just insult half of Europe. Why not? The Teeling porter cask, again, I thought quite disappointing. Not enough porter character, certainly not enough maturity, and you know, again, a flawed bottling. Storyman, yeah, I kind of liked Storyman. Overpriced, I think. Maybe obviously James, what's his face, is falling on hard times and can't get the rolls anymore and needs to fleece you guys for some more money. I don't know, but yeah, just a little bit too expensive for what it actually was. Mid-40s, more than happy with that. I think if you kind of forget about the kind of the retail price, I think that the quality of the juice is pretty good. No problem with that. Ardnahoe, loved that. Thought that was an absolutely stunning whiskey for a 5-year-old new Isla. They really have come out of the gates with a bang. And like I said, they've got to keep that one up. And Torabhaig, like I said, I had absolutely no reservations about Torabhaig whatsoever. New releases from Torabhaig, I don't need to taste them. I know they're going to be, well, I hope I do get the opportunity to taste them, but I'm more than happy to shove them on the shelf without even going down that route, because I know what the guys at Torabhaig and Marussia Beverages that are behind them are all about, and I know that they are going to produce a great product. And yeah, so everything is wonderful, isn't it? I think this was a really good episode of the show. I really enjoyed it. So until next week, I mean, I've had various comments about how shiny and new the show looks, and yeah, just bring out my good side, Mr. Devine, or Deville, yeah. Well, anyway, until next week, good dramming and good afternoon.